Hello, everyone. Billy Graham's story is often told as a shining tale of spiritual triumph, a journey of a small-town farm boy who rose to become one of the most influential religious figures in modern history. But behind the stadium lights, the television broadcasts, the best-selling books, and the adoring crowds were struggles so deep, battles so private, and burdens so heavy that very few people ever knew the true weight he carried, because Billy Graham's life was not the picture-perfect portrait the world saw on magazine covers or presidential stages. Instead, it was a life shaped by constant pressure, relentless expectations, emotional sacrifice, and a silent war between who he really was and who the world demanded him to be. From his earliest days, Graham felt a profound loneliness, a feeling that no matter how many people surrounded him, he was always standing at a distance, forced into a role larger than any human being could ever fully bear. He became a preacher, then a rising voice, then a global phenomenon, and before he could fully understand what was happening, nations, presidents, and millions of followers began treating him not like a man, but like a symbol, a moral compass, a standard of purity, someone who had to be flawless at every moment, and that unrealistic expectation created a pressure that followed him every day of his life. People saw the commanding voice, the charismatic presence, the endless energy, but they never saw the anxiety he fought before stepping onto the stage, the guilt he carried whenever he felt he wasn't living up to his own message, or the constant fear that one mistake could shatter the faith of millions who saw him as their hero. His private journals from different decades reveal a man who often questioned himself, writing confessions like, "I feel inadequate. I am not the man they think I am, and sometimes I fear I am failing God," exposing the reality that behind the world's most famous preacher stood a deeply human man wrestling with doubt, fear, and exhaustion. His relentless schedule, traveling from continent to continent, preaching to crowds of 30,000, 50,000, 100,000 at a time, left him physically drained and emotionally depleted. Yet he kept pushing forward because he believed his calling demanded it, even though his family was quietly paying the price. His wife, Ruth, raised their children almost entirely alone for years as Billy spent 60 to 70% of his life away from home. And his daughter later revealed that, "We shared our father with the world, but the world got more of him than we ever did," a heartbreaking truth that reflected the cost of his mission. His son Franklin spiraled into rebellion during his teenage years, which Billy blamed on himself, convinced that his physical absence had created wounds he could not heal. Meanwhile, the political influence he gained, becoming a spiritual advisor to multiple U.S. presidents, placed him under an even harsher spotlight, turning every word he said into national headlines, every private conversation into political speculation, and every public appearance into a potential controversy. The pressure of being both a religious leader and a political figure nearly broke him during the 1970s and 80s, as he feared that one wrong step could destroy not only his reputation, but the credibility of the spiritual message he had dedicated his entire life to spreading. His health also deteriorated during these years. Exhaustion, infections, breathing issues, insomnia, and long stretches of debilitating fatigue. Yet, he hid most of it from the public, appearing on stage with the same voice of authority even when he could barely stand backstage, because he felt that stepping back would mean letting millions down. Then came his final decades, perhaps the most emotionally painful of all, as age, sickness, and physical decline forced him to face the reality that he could no longer do what had defined him his whole life. Parkinson-like symptoms, vision loss, weakness, and intense chronic pain made simple tasks difficult, and for a man whose identity was built on preaching, the inability to continue tore at his sense of purpose. Yet it was during these final years that Billy Graham spoke some of his most revealing, vulnerable truths. In one message he confessed, "I spent my whole life telling people that God loves them, but my greatest struggle was believing that God loved me," a raw admission that showed just how heavy the burden of being a spiritual icon truly was. As he approached the end of his life, he reflected on missed moments with his children, regrets about his absence, and the emotional toll of always trying to live up to an image that no human being could sustain. Yet he also expressed gratitude for the countless lives
When Billy
changed
Graham
through his
passed
ministry.
away
In 2018, the world mourned a towering figure, but few truly understood the depth of the storms he weathered, the sacrifices he made behind closed doors, and the emotional battles he fought in silence, because Billy Graham was not the untouchable legend history often paints. He was a man carrying extraordinary responsibilities. A leader who spent decades pouring hope into a world that never realized how much hope he himself needed, and perhaps the greatest lesson his life leaves behind is this: even the strongest, most admired, most celebrated figures may be fighting a hidden war, and sometimes it is the wounded ones who shine the brightest light into the world. Thanks for watching.